Hey everyone, welcome to the 5th animation log of making the animated series called Valkorey. In video logs like this, I explain my process of creating an anime-styled show from scratch. And I know many of you have been waiting eagerly for this one, so I'll get started right away. Log number 5 is all about making anime-styled backgrounds and how I approach the sound and music in the series. I first want to point out though that I am not using any AI-generated content for the show. Having it made entirely by people adds a lot of personality in my eyes, and as an artist myself, I enjoy the process as well. Currently, I am the only background artist, meaning every single background that you see right now was made by me. When making a series, I find it important to consider the style for both the animation and the environment. The backgrounds for the show Valkorey are heavily inspired by those made by Studio Ghibli, as well as the natural backgrounds and colors from Attack on Titan. When considering a style for a series background, I always think about the colors so they stay consistent, the kind of brushwork to get specific patterns, and the amount of detail the references have versus the detail I can make myself. During the pre-production, I made a detailed style board for the show's backgrounds, and kept my volume of The Art of Princess Mononoke close as a reference for brushwork. Even though I cannot match their style 100% yet, I am not letting this get in the way of making a series. One way to not worry too much about matching the higher quality of the primary references is to look at anime with a simpler background style. They are by no means bad, but they are 9 times out of 10 more achievable for multiple reasons. I personally chose a more complex style because it fits the show's theme and complements the characters. I also wanted to keep improving my background art, and I know that I will have to keep challenging myself to get better. In the style boards, you find different references for trees, grass, rocks, clouds, mountains, dirt, and so on. This way I can zoom in and understand the brush strokes and try to replicate them for different kinds of background elements. On top of that, it also lets me see the contrast and the different colors. I made multiple color palettes that I can stick to for the base colors, shadows, and highlights. When I'm sticking to these palettes, it also allows me to make assets to quickly block out a background. Studio Ghibli values the look of original hand-drawn work, meaning they make everything from scratch. Because I am on my own and also do not have the money to paint everything traditionally, because art supplies are quite expensive, I stick with the digital backgrounds and self-made background assets. Doing it this way allows me to put the amount of detail that I like, while also saving some time. However, this doesn't mean that every background consists of multi-use background assets. Especially the more detailed backgrounds, which take more time to make, are usually 100% unique. Blurred backgrounds, where the characters are the main focus, do have multi-use assets, or just less detail in general, since they don't need it. During layout, I sketch the background in combination with the characters that are going to be in the cut. If you don't know what layout is, you can check out this video that I made before. Animating characters and painting backgrounds are not done at the same time. I want my team to have enough to work on, so I usually prioritize the animation first. When the other members are busy, I tackle the background. There are, of course, situations where it's the other way around, especially if the background is the main focus. I use a mix of custom and standard Clip Studio paintbrushes, such as the gouache. Since I do not like the standard watercolor brushes of Clip, I have a custom set for that as well. The more traditional looking brushes are what I rely on the most. The way they interact with color on the layer gives them a more natural look. I actually didn't paint a lot traditionally. Back in high school, I sometimes spent my lunch at the art classrooms just to paint a little. Sometimes backgrounds are split up into multiple layers so they can move separately from each other in a cut. In the industry, we call these books. It is a great and easy way to add more depth and movement. At some point, I will also use camera projection techniques for complex moving backgrounds, but so far I haven't used them for the project yet. Let's move on to music and sound effects, a crucial step that I put a lot of value into. Music is something I really enjoy, and to me, it is just as important as getting the visuals right for the show Valkorey. The series has a specific theme when it comes to story and emotions, and I want the soundtrack to reflect this. I'm sure I briefly talked about it in the very first video log, but now I want to dig a little bit deeper. The actual music, like songs, the ambient effects, such as the environment, and the sound effects. And even within these three categories, I have subsections that sometimes overlap. For example, the music tracks fit into two different categories. One that resembles the more aggressive and traumatizing side of the show, and one that resembles the peaceful and quiet moments. Both categories have a distinct ambient music style that pulls you into the scene, and also both rely on the piano for harmony. The first category has the Tokyo Ghoul soundtrack as its main inspiration, while the second one leans more towards the classical music in Princess Mononoke. However, while both categories sound like opposites, when you listen to them, they also share many similarities. Since the soundtrack hasn't been shared with the public yet, I can't go too much into detail. Luckily, a tiny part of it is already on Patreon and also scheduled to be released on YouTube this year. I am not a musician or a sound designer. Just because I touched an instrument once or twice doesn't mean I know how to make music or even understand it on a deeper professional level. But that doesn't mean that I do not appreciate a good soundtrack, and I believe that one can accomplish a lot by taking the time to listen and not rush through this step. The show Valkorey takes place in nature. This means that the sound of generic birds or insects, trees and wind are a big part of the ambient effects you will hear. While I could just import a free-to-use sound for wind blowing against leaves and call it a day, I also feel like you can achieve a more complex result by putting in the extra work. When I'm designing ambient beds, I ask myself what's in the environment and carefully combine the sounds, instead of having only a generic bird whistling in the background. I did not go into this blindly though. Before making this video, I traveled to different locations to do my research and even recorded my own sounds. For sound effects, however, I sometimes take a different approach. Since the show is anime styled, it makes sense for the sound effects to reflect this as well. I'm not only considering natural sound effects, like walking through grass, but also specific tunes, typically heard in anime. Some I make myself, and others are bought specifically for the series.
君は息をしていなかったんだ。まるで僕のすべてが一瞬で崩れ去ったようだった。
誰だお前。
When doing anime-specific sound effects, I select a couple of shows with the style that I like. Not every anime uses the same sounds, and by selecting only a few of them, I am not overwhelmed by the many possibilities. I absolutely love working on a show, and I've also met so many great people through it already. Because of the community, I was able to expand the team, and I again want to thank all of you for it. We are close to releasing our autumn milestone, which is the trailer/intro. All of you are already supporting the project so much by watching, commenting, and being part of the community. If you want to see behind-the-scenes content, sneak peeks, and have early access, consider joining our Patreon. The money we make from Patreon goes to the team members and is also invested in the show. One of the reasons why we have such a nice soundtrack is because of all the Patreon support and the donations. However, our Discord is also a nice place to get a few free updates and get a chance to attend live streams. If I'm not seeing you there, then I'll see you again next month. Bye!